we are. I want to demonstrate the Ollie debug projects for you. So if I go here, and here they are, simple exe hacking and hacking Minesweeper with Ollie debug. These are the two projects I want to demonstrate. And like I say, you're going to like it. Ollie debug is good, clean fun. So you have to download Ollie debug and hashcat and install them. You have to have a Windows machine. I think any version will do. I got a funny defect. Let's see. In my glorious theatrical display. All right, there we are. Anyway, so you download Ollie debug and hashcat, and then you get Putty. And Putty is just a Windows app. Now I'm going to take these instructions and shove them over to the side and put my Windows machine here. Now I'm using a Mac, and I use a Windows virtual machine. You can use a real Windows machine, or you can use a cloud machine on Amazon or Google or something, but I use a local virtual machine just because it's free. So you download this Putty, and so the first thing is to make sure that the Putty you've got is exactly the one we want to use. It's not the latest version. It's a particular version of Putty for no very good reason, but you won't be able to find the flags in this project unless you use exactly the version I expect you to use. Hashcalc is a app that's free on, you add this to Windows, and then you can calculate the hash of files, which is something Windows doesn't let you do by default. So if I go into my downloads folder, I've already downloaded Putty here. So if I drag Putty and drop it on hashcalc, it calculates some of these hashes, and the SHA-256 hash starts 9F9. And if you look here, that's the thing, it starts 9F9, it's good. This is exactly the version of Putty I want to use. Okay, so I'm gonna, here's a bunch of stuff left over from before. Let me just get rid of some extra stuff here. And I'm going to make I'll just delete this stuff. There we go. Okay, so the only thing I have here is Putty, and what I'm going to do is make an extra copy of Putty, because, all right. Yeah, just go to samsclass.info and you'll find the podcast. I see the question. Let me just point it out here. If you go here, yep, just go to samsclass.info and there's the podcast right at the top. All right, good. Anyway, so let me get rid of these slides. So here we are. So I'm going to make a copy of Putty. I've learned to always make a copy. Control-C, Control-V, and work with a copy just because it's easy to get confused and damage your first copy, and then you have to download it again. Why bother? So I'm making a file called Putty2. All right, now I'm going to play with that. Now, let me get my instructions and follow my path here. All right. So, first we got to learn how Putty works. In case you haven't used Putty, it's a very common Windows utility. So I'll run, I guess, Putty2. And what it does is it lets you make an SSH connection to a server. So you can put in the name of a server. You can use any server. I just use one of mine, ad.samsclass.info. And then open. And then it's going to invite me to log in. And it's pretty small, but it's saying log in as up here. And now I could give it a name and password and connect to the server, but I don't care about any of that. I want to just understand how this much of it works and mess with it. So it prints this message, log in as, that's all the functionality we care about. So I'm going to close it and forget about that. That's just what Putty does. So now let's do it in Ollie debug. So you install Ollie debug. And Ollie debug is a 32-bit program. It's running on 64-bit code here. A 64-bit operating system, which is fine. And so, we make this big. All right, if I open Putty, which is in my downloads folder, downloads Putty2. All right, so when I open Putty, this is what happens. It loads and it stops. Down here it says paused in the corner. Like I said, the first thing you do in Ollie is you look in this corner to see what's going on, and right now it's paused. Now, if I was running on a 32-bit operating system, I would now see the start of Putty, but I don't because it's 32-bit code running on a 64-bit operating system. So, if I want to see the actual Putty code, this is the code that prepares Windows to run 32-bit code. So if I want to see Putty, I have to run the first time. And you can do debug, run, or you can use this little button here, the arrow, to run. So if I run it, it runs and then pauses again. Because what it did was set up the Windows on Windows environment to run 32-bit code, and now it's ready to go, and now I've got Putty code. And you can see now it's calling Putty routines, so it pushes 60 onto the stack, then it takes some addresses in a module called, and part of the Putty 2 memory segment, and puts them up. And notice here I've got some, it's going to call a Windows API call, getting a version of something. And if I scroll down here, I'll see more of these. So you can see the names of the Windows API calls it's making here. And if you're And we're going to get more used to these Windows API calls as we go through the class. You can see the API calls it makes. And like I say, if you just look at the right-hand side here, you can see more or less what it's doing. All right. And so now I'm going to run it. So I ran it once, and it paused again, because that was just converting from 64 to 32 bits. And if I run it again, it's going to actually run. And now it says running. And it popped up another window here, which did not come to the front, but it's there. And if I click that, it comes to the front. And now I can go ad.samsclass.info and say open. And now it's going to run. You see stuff happening. And then it opens this box and prints login as again. So I ran it in the debugger. It runs slower. But right now, I'm not getting much good out of the debugger because the code is just running past things because I haven't put in any breakpoints. So I'd like to find the code that prints this message, login as, so let's do that. If I go here and I right-click here, it matters, by the way. This is something that took me a while to understand about Ollie. These different panes are doing different things. This is the text section that includes the assembly code. This is where you can do a hex dump of any section you want, which might be something different. This is the stack, by the way, which we'll talk more about later, and these are the registers. So if you right-click in one pane, it often has a different result than right-clicking in another pane, and you have to be careful. Now what I want to do is right-click in this pane and find all referenced text strings. This is extremely handy, and what this is going to do is it's going to read those assembly language instructions and find the ones that reference strings, because it's going to print those strings or use them to open file names or URLs or anything like that. And then it's going to find those strings and list them up for me. And this is one command that is missing from WinDebug, which I really wish it was there. This is one of the things I can't do well in WinDebug. So I search for all referenced text strings, and now I get a list of all the strings. And we got to make sure this window up here shows that I'm looking in Putty. If you have done this at the wrong time while running the program, you might be looking inside Windows internal functions at the strings, and then you're not going to find the strings you need. So there's some caveats here, troubleshooting tips in the project to warn you when you're in the wrong place. But here I am in Putty, so now I can right-click and search for text, and I can search for this text, login as. And if I just hit OK, it's going to find ASCII of login as. So one of them is at 417.053, and if I search again, there's another one at 41CB6E. And if I search again, it's done. There are no more. So there's two possible places where I might be using that string. So to find out which one I'm using, I'm going to put a breakpoint in. Here's one of them. I'm going to right-click and toggle breakpoint. Right-click. That's irritating me. All right, I don't know why it's giving me trouble with the right-click. I'm going to press F2. F2 is another way to set a breakpoint. So that has turned red, telling me there's a breakpoint there. Now the other one was up here somewhere, so I'm going to scroll to the top and do another search. There's the other one, ASCII login as, so I'm going to click on that and press F2. Okay, now I put breakpoints at both of those places where it stores that. And so when it tries to use that data, it will stop. So now I'm going to run the program again. So I'm done with this window. I'm going to close it. Now I'm back to here. It's in the middle of running. It's already gone past the spot I wanted. So I'm going to just restart the program. You do debug, restart. And I do this a lot. You very often run a program. You need to start over. So debug, restart is your best friend. We'll start the program again. I say yes. So it launches the program, and now, of course, it does nothing because it pauses. It's waiting in Windows to set up the 32-bit Windows on Windows component, so I have to run to get to 32-bit mode, and then I have to run again to actually start running Putty. And it runs and pops up this box, and now I have to give it the name of a server to connect to, so I use my same old server, ad.samsclass.info, and say open, and now it runs, and now it pauses. It hit the breakpoint right here, 41CB6E, and it tells me down here in little tiny font, breakpoint at this address. So it hit the breakpoint. You see it did not yet print that message. It opened up a black box and then stopped. So now I know this is the one that actually prints that message. So I found it, and I can either remember that address, which in this case I can remember it because it's just right here in my instructions, 41CB6E. Otherwise I would copy it to Notepad or write it down or something, because now I want to get rid of the breakpoints. So I can go to Window, Window View, Breakpoints. There they are, and I can delete them. Right-click, remove, right-click, remove. Okay, now there are no more breakpoints. Now I'm going to be able, now by the way, if you play with the windows, you can end up with a funny looking screen where it's not normal. The way to get to the normal screen is to go to the CPU window and maximize it. That's home. So that's a useful thing to know because sometimes you end up stuck in these other windows that aren't as interesting. So now I would like to mess with this instruction. So I'm going to right click. Oh, first I'm going to examine how this instruction works. This instruction is pushing something called 467C7C on the stack, and notice over here it tells me ASCII login as. Now this instruction, you can see it here, 68 is push, and this is that address, 467C7C. It's in little endian order, with the lower numbers at first and the high numbers later. So this is the command, and if you right click, you can follow in dump immediate constant. It will take the constant address in this instruction and put it down here. This is what this dump is for. You can dump any area of memory you want to see what's there. And so I've dumped the memory pointed to by this instruction, and as you can see, it points to this string login as. And in ASCII, strings are 1 byte per character, and when it hits a 0, that's the end of the string. So here's the string. So now this pushes that address on the string, and then it calls some function that must ultimately go and call a print function of some kind, and that's what's going on here. So if I take this 467C7C and I change that to 7D, it'll skip the first letter. So that's what I'm going to do. Now to modify the code, you right-click and assemble. And now it will show you the instruction that's currently there, which is push 467C7C, and you can just change it. I can change it to D, and then assemble, and then cancel. And you see it changes here to 467C7D, and this tells you it's now login as without the L, because I skipped the first letter, and the null pointer is still the end. So I've now modified the program. Now, I think I want to just save it here. Okay, I'm going to run it from here, right? Debug, run. And it closed. All right, I'm going to save it. Wait, no, I did. It worked. Okay, I ran it and it worked. It printed login as without the L. So now I have made a program that is slightly modified. It skips 1 letter. Haven't done anything too great, but now I want to save it this way. So this is something that took me a long time to learn about Ollie. When you modify a program in Ollie, it is not easy to save the changes. The way to do it without going mad is to save it after every single change. Because if you change one segment of code, like the text section, and you change another section, like the data section, you can't save them both at the same time. So the menu is a little confusing. I go to the text section. This is where I made the change. I right-click and copy to executable all modifications. Now, it is lying. It is not saving all modifications. It's saving all modifications in that segment. Now, I only made 1 modification, so it's going to work. But what I kept doing before is I would change stuff here and change stuff there and try to save it, and that doesn't work. So I copy to executable, all modifications, copy all. now I get a program, which is a new version of Putty 2. Now I can right-click and save file, and now I can change the name. And this is why I made a copy of the program, because it's pretty easy to forget to change the name and save it on top of your original program, and that's annoying. So anyway, this is Putty 3 I just made. So now I'm done. I'm going to close Ollie for now. And I got Putty, Putty 2, and Putty 3. Now Putty and Putty 2 are the same. Putty 3 is the one I changed. So if I run Putty 3 and give it ad.samsclass.info and open it, it prints login as instead of login as. And that means, by the way, in case this is not obvious, if I run hashcalc and I do a hash of the original program, Putty 2, it starts with 9F9, the SHA-256. But if I do the hash of Putty 3, it's different. It starts with B31, because if you change any byte, the whole the hash value totally changes. And what was the second right click? It's exactly specified in the instructions, but I did right click, save all modifications, and then right click copy to executable, something like that. So you'll see it here. It's right click, copy to executable, all modifications, copy all, and then save file. So it's right there. This, like I say, you really need the instructions, because for a long time I tried to just do it, and you have to do it exactly right, or you end up not really saving your changes, which is very annoying, especially when you're sort of new to this and confused. So now I've made a file called PuttyMod. All right, now I'm going to modify it again. So let's modify this Putty 3 again. So go to Ollie Debug, and then maximize the CPU window again, I say. All right, and let's open Putty 3 and modify it again. Putty 3. Okay, now I want to modify, I'm just going to right-click, go to expression, and you can go to an address, and I'm going to go to 41CB6E, which is the place where that command was that we modified. All right, so there it is, login as. Now I want to change it to say something else. So I'm going to right-click, follow in dump, immediate constant, and now I'm going to change the writing down here. I can drag through this stuff, and then right-click, binary, edit. And now I can change it. I could type in hexadecimal values, or I can go here and backspace and just type in text. So I'm going to type in darkness, or no, badness it was. Badness, there. Now it says badness instead of login as. So I say OK. It changes to red, so I can see I've changed it. And now, to save this one, I have to click down here where the changes are. Right-click, copy to executable file, and here it is. Now I right-click and save file, and again I'm going to change the name to Putty 4. So Putty 4 is a version of Putty that prints the word badness. So let's see if that works. ad.samsclass.info and say open. And there it is, printing badness. So it's kind of fun. And by the way, let me mention something else, which is pretty awesome and very strange. Putty is signed code. Now, the whole point of signed code is you're not supposed to be able to modify it. If you right-click on Putty and go to Properties, there's a tab called Digital Signatures. This is signed code. It's signed by somebody named Simon, who I guess is the guy that wrote Putty, Simon Tatum. If you click on that name and go to Details, it tells you the signature is okay. So this program has not been modified. But if you take the one I just modified and go to Properties and go to Digital Signatures, it still says it's signed by Simon Tatum. But if you go here, it tells you the signature is not valid. So Microsoft has the ability to sign the code, and it has the ability to notice when the signature is broken, but it doesn't warn you or stop running or anything or pop up a box or refuse to go, which is very strange. So I sometimes get Microsoft engineers in my classes. I would love for somebody to explain to me what's going on here? What's the point of signing the code when you don't stop me from running modified code? Like, what the hell? Anyway, so here we are, breaking the signature and just continuing to use it. So anyway, I don't know why you bother to understand and interpret signed code, but anyway. And I guess I'll mention, I've been telling students for years I'm going to make my own badges. And now that City College is not letting anybody out of California register for our classes and get credit, I think there's more need for that. So this is my latest plan for badges. I just made this today, and this is going to be signed. I figured I got a code signing certificate, so I'm going to give you a program which is digitally signed by InfoSec Decoded, our corporation, to prove that if you get an A in my class, you'll have an opportunity to get a badge. Anyway, so I'll have that working pretty soon. I got the prototypes working. I just need to do a little more work on it. So anyway, that's Putty with badness in it. And now there's more fun things to patch here. I'm going to stop this recording and make a separate recording for each category of demo here. So I stop.